all the boring stuff you do with handling these incidents that happen 10 times every day, we can automate that. You don't have to deal with resetting user passwords because they clicked a malicious link. This Power App does it for you, or this Lambda function does it for you. Then they're like, oh, so I can start doing what I think is fun, which is looking into this and this. Yeah, if we just go on this journey together, then you can in the future do that. And they're like, okay, how do I learn Terraform?
O3C, Cybersecurity Podcast.
O3 Cyber Cloud Security Podcast. We are back. So we're back here now, fifth season. And for anyone who's following the podcast on Spotify or the Apple Podcast app, you might already notice a difference. I'm speaking English, and my name is Håkon, and I'm going to be the host this season. So this season is going to be a bit different than the previous seasons in this podcast. First of all, we're going to do English to broaden the audience of guests. And we're going to do about 8 to 12 episodes where we're going to go through cloud security topic by topic. And we're also going to have some very cool special episodes outside of cloud security with exciting guests. And I'm just going to say we have some great guests lined up already. Today, we're going to talk about cloud security challenges. What's hard about securing cloud workloads? What's hard about doing a secure migration to the cloud? And with me, of course, I have the two original hosts of the O3 Cybersecurity Podcast, Olav and Karim. Olav?
Thank you, Håkon. Super excited that you will take over this from us and drive it for the next season with cloud security. Short about me, my name is Olav. I'm 35 years old. 2 kids. Started the podcast with Karim in 2020, I believe. And if I remember right, we have about 4 seasons in Norwegian. Is that correct?
Yeah, 4 seasons.
Good. I usually say 5, but the 4 it is. Started O3 Cyber together with you, Håkon, and Karim in 2022. And I focus on helping our clients transform how they work with cloud security. So, yeah, background from the military, from IT security manager in Boots Pharmacy, and consultancy the last 5 years.
Yeah, and I'm thrilled to have you here, Olav, to be a guest on your own podcast today. And that's going to happen a few times throughout this season as well. You're going to join in and be an expert commentator with our guest. And we also have Karim here, one of the previous co-hosts as well. So thank you for being here, Karim.
Yes, thanks for having me on my own podcast. Karim El-Mohawi. I've been doing cloud security at O3 Cyber, working with a lot of different clients doing cloud security assessments, helping them operationalize their cloud. Prior to that, I worked 5 years with the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Norway, and prior to that again I did 5 years of building a private cloud with Intility.
Cool, thank you. I guess I should introduce myself as well. On this podcast I started out as a guest, and I've done a hostile takeover now, so this podcast is mine, from guest to host. My background is, I would say, development, then went into security and ended up in cloud security. Joined O3 Cyber the 1st of January 2023, but I'd been chatting with you guys for a while. But now back to...
So you're global admin of the podcast now?
I'm global admin.
Nice.
Yeah. Back to the season ahead. So since you guys have 4 seasons of history, why don't you tell me what is changing and what has changed with the podcast? Where are we taking it now, and why are we changing up the format and the language and the way we've structured the season?
Yeah, can I list? Let's start super short with the backstory, and then maybe you can help us a bit with where we're going as well as the host. But when I met Karim first time in 2019 or 2020, we discussed cloud security. He was working in the oil fund. I was working in Boots or Walgreens Boots Pharmacy. And when he moved to New York, I asked him if he wanted to create a cybersecurity podcast together with me in Norwegian, and he said yes, like 10 seconds later. So every Sunday after that, I think we recorded for many years. Because Karin was in New York and I was in Oslo, so 2 different time zones as well. So Season 1 was a basic cybersecurity program that all companies should have. And Season 2, 3, and 4 was with guests with different topic, all in Norwegian. Karim, do you have anything you want to add? Or
Yeah, no, I think that's really the story, and I guess why we're here now, changing it up a bit. I guess we kind of grew tired of doing the same concept, and it does require a lot of time to produce a podcast, and between everything else you want to do, I think our passion from like only doing a podcast or spending so much time on a podcast kind of drifted towards how do we find time for the other passion projects that we also have. And I guess that's kind of also why we're passing the torch to you to continue and drive this podcast forward. And also with this whole new, like, let's try doing it, like change things up completely. And you can probably tell us what we have ahead in this season.
Yeah, and I'm grateful and super stoked to be taking over as the main host. I put some extra wax in my hair, put on a nice white shirt, and one thing we haven't addressed is that we're going to record video as well. So for people that like to watch, I'm an avid biker, and it's winter here in Norway, so I sit indoors on my indoor roller, and then I need some content on the screen ahead of me. So if you're like me or on the treadmill or whatever, you can watch while you listen to the podcast. That's one of the things that's going to change going ahead.
And they have a professional editor this year, right?
We have a professional producer and editor, so hopefully the sound quality will be even higher. And for the guests that are going to be invited, that means you will be able to edit out stuff if you want to, if you regret what you said. No, so I started listening to this podcast back in season 1, and I really like that format. And then you guys had some super exciting episodes, people talking about their experiences, what they're doing in large organizations, how they're addressing cybersecurity. And then that maybe grew a bit stale in Norwegian. We didn't have the guests we wanted to have. We couldn't get new exciting stories. So I just thought to myself, what about doing season 1, but in the field that we are experts in, so cloud security. So I talked to you, Olav, I talked to Karim, and I proposed my idea, and you guys were open to me taking over your subscriber count, and then we went that way. So what do you think this season can provide that isn't already covered by other podcasts in the space of cybersecurity and cloud security? Karim?
So I think there's potential to come with more nuances. So what you're seeing is there's some really good cloud podcasts out there. You have the Cloud Security podcast with Ashish. You have the Crying Out Cloud podcast, which I had the honor of recently being a guest at. But I think what we can provide is the view that we have as cloud security practitioners working daily with cloud security matters and trying to kind of bring the view of the practitioner into the podcast and have that as kind of the curated part of it.
Olav?
Yeah, more or less the same. After starting R2C, we have met a lot of super skilled people around the world in different countries. So getting them on the podcast will be very interesting. And then also on the other side table, which will be you, Håkon, and your guests, and sometimes us, you also have you have the really good knowledge to ask the good questions, to have a good conversation, to get it quite deep dived, which in my head is also can be a bit different from other podcasts. So
yeah. And that's what we're really aiming at, taking our expertise and our experience as a boutique consultant company, a boutique advisors, and then just asking the, let's say, hard questions to independent people that we have on the podcast. But on that topic, and I've prepped you guys a bit, what are the topics we are going to cover this season, and which topics are you most excited about?
I think I'm really excited for cloud security strategy and transformation, that part, doing that in big and large organizations on scale. So I know we have lined up a really cool guest here, which I'm really looking forward to talk to. So that's probably the one on top of my head. Which one do you have, Håkon?
I think the cloud threat landscape, of course, the one you just mentioned, which is going to be the first episode with a guest. And
teaser.
It's a huge name. is going to be very interesting. Just talking to people that have hands-on experience with seeing a lot of different threat actors and how they attack the cloud. And I think also cloud threat detection and cloud incident response, which I also know you are quite passionate about, Karim. So I guess I'm going to ask you to co-host those episodes. But I think all episodes will be great for the audience we're trying to capture. We're going to have cloud IAM, we're going to have cloud strategy, cloud threat landscape, IR, AppSec, CI/CD in the cloud. So I think overall,
Instant response in cloud will also be super interesting.
and we have a great guest lined up for that, or actually two, because I asked one guest, can you be on for that topic? And the guest was like, yeah, I can be on for that topic, but I can't promise that I won't enter this other topic. So I was like, yeah, that sounds good. But now let's dive into the hard questions where you are the experts. I'm going to start very high level, so just take it wherever you want. Why is cloud security hard?
Why is cloud security hard? I think it's hard because it's different. It's not what we're used to. So you have to learn a whole new set of skills in order to be able to secure the cloud. And also, if you compare it to like how things used to be, like I remember like in my early days of doing IT, no matter what mistake I did in terms of like configuration, it didn't have the same exposure as it would have in a cloud environment where, like, let's say I set a insecure property in Active Directory, then, well, that wouldn't be immediately available for a threat actor to enumerate and try to exploit that unless they already had a foothold in the environment. But let's say I have a misconfigured role trust policy in AWS, for instance, then, well, that could be immediately exploited by a threat actor. So that makes it a bit, not necessarily more difficult, but you need to have more knowledge. There's less room for mistakes, you could say.
Yeah. So global exposure when you mess up, and it's very human to mess up. We do it all the time. Adds complexity and uniqueness to the skill you need to have. What about you, Olav? Why is cloud security hard?
I think finding the right cloud operating model, maybe. So many companies try to follow different frameworks and think that's the answer, but they suddenly figure out that it needs to be tailored to them and how they work, and probably forget that they need to upskill and have a strategy for how they're going to do things. I think most companies we've been talking to says like, oh, now we're going the DevOps way. It's going to be super smooth, super agile, super fast. Talk to them 6 months later, 12 months later. Now we have a platform team. We're trying to offer central source. Okay, how do you add security to that? How do you do security? That's a good question. Don't know. Talk to them 1 year later. Now we have a cloud security team. So, and I think we start to see a lot of organizations in Norway being really good in cloud security, but they have been on that journey for quite a long time. And then we meet a new client which is on the start of the journey. They're going the same mistakes that more mature client did 2 years ago. And it seems like it's almost impossible, even though we invite them, we talk to them, we bring them into more modern organizations. They kind of need to go through that pain to find their path again, because everything is different.
Yeah.
There's no one way for all of them.
And so the transformation manager in the room, he goes straight to people and processes, and the tech guy goes straight to the technology issues, which kind of...
That's why we team up, right?
Yeah, that's why we go in as a team and help our customers do the whole people, processes, and technology. But you touch upon a very interesting part of this question, Olav. The different archetypes that exist. You have large, mature enterprises that move slowly to the cloud. They have a transformation project. And then you also have the cloud native, born in the cloud startups, or most of them are probably not startups anymore. Some of them are scale-ups or enterprises that were born in the cloud.
Yeah, many developers, few developers in big internal team. Everything was outsourced. Yeah.
So how would one go about kind of understanding what archetype am I and what challenges does that entail?
So I would usually like to try to understand a business strategy first. Why are they going to cloud? Usually they can't answer that question. So someone had a credit card, or someone they're forced to cloud because the service wasn't offered on-prem anymore. So try to understand that first, and then try to understand, okay, how can cloud enable my business strategy? And from that again, okay, then what do I need? What services do I need? Who should operate them? How should it work? Who should be responsible? What knowledge do I have internally? What knowledge do I need? Do I need to upskill? Do I need to hire? So start with kind of those basics to build the other blocks upon, I would say.
And from the technological cybersecurity, cloud security side, Karim, how can an organization, depending on their archetype, born in the cloud, enterprise, went to the cloud, how can they hopefully at scale start addressing the cloud security issues they have? Is it scanning? Is it manually going through their environments? Is it trying to do it all over again?
Right. So I think, and it kind of starts with the operating model that Olav touched upon, because in that period where you don't have a platform engineering team and you have everyone running around doing DevOps, that's basically what I would call anarchy. But then how do you go about this? I think, so like first thing first, like gain visibility. So if you go like all the way back to the basics of like the CIS benchmark or CIS top 20 controls, gain visibility, like what cloud workloads do you have, which cloud accounts do you have,
And maybe link that to the business and the business strategy.
Always.
Back to you, Karim.
Yeah, definitely. So, but I think like gaining that visibility first, and then like how can you operationalize this? So you have all the insights you need when you've gained the visibility. Now, how do you make action of this? Like, how do you make sure that if there's a misconfiguration, you're able to detect it or identify it, and then also have it remediated, for instance. And then it's going kind of a step back again, like enablement, like how can you enable people to build more secure services or avoid building misconfigurations as well. So it's kind of like it ends up being a full program where you need to think about gaining the visibility, preventing the misconfiguration. And it's, well, I guess I could go into depth on this, but I think that's kind of the high level.
Yeah, I think if you have from what I see, if you have a strong cloud platform team that helps the developers push their code safely to the cloud, and then you have some process and people and tools around that to help that scale.
Yeah, because I guess we're kind of touching on like the paved path concept, which is super key, and that's also kind of where I'm going as well with this. It's like having the paved path, but also the paved path won't be like your silver bullet either, but that's like a really important fundamental part of getting cloud operations and security right.
Exactly. And then when you have that part, it's easier to democratize and operationalize cloud security in organizations. So developers get relevant information and context for how to help fix their security issues, and not just have a central security team having to chase everyone.
So just to play it back to you to see if I understood. So one thing is the transformation journey of people and processes. Then we have often experience a lack of visibility into the environment. And to solve that, we go on a platform engineering journey where we strive for a paved path with secure defaults, secure by design, and then maybe go from there and start investing in building or buying tooling to help these processes. Am I correctly understanding you guys?
I think you're onto it. And then there's like the other thing I see people forget when they get into the cloud is like the basic operations they used to do before, like patching your operating system. Suddenly people stop doing that because they're in the cloud. And that's also like never forget the basics. Even though you're introducing all these new domains and new ways of doing things, you still got to remember to do the basics right as well. So I feel like people coming into the cloud, like, okay, suddenly they're advancing how they do everything. So their maturity increases in terms of their operational processes, but they forget about those basic processes they had and its intention.
Yeah, the different responsibility model for each service they want to consume in the cloud, right? Yeah,
exactly. It's like suddenly you don't have operating systems anymore, or you forget that you have operating systems, which is the only thing you used to operate before. But now that it's just like an EC2 or a virtual machine as a resource in the cloud, you forget about the OS that has to be patched and all of those things.
You think it's serverless, but you still have code security and identity access management, API security.
Yeah. It's like you need to deserve to worry about 0 days. You need to be very mature to be to deserve to worry about 0 days. And in the cloud, you need to deserve to be able to worry about container integrity, everything is cryptographically signed before it's deployed. Like, if you are there, you're in a very good place. But
yeah, back to like people wanting to do what's sexy security and not what's actually what should be prioritized, right?
Go for bang for the buck, not ensure that it's correctly cryptographically signed as the first task. But then moving back, what are the most common challenges you guys see with our clients and in the industry as a whole, and how do those challenges maybe map to archetypes, if you can go that deep? But like, what are the most common challenges we address with our clients and the industry?
I think I'm a little short because I feel like I'm repeating myself, but no, cloud strategy and business strategy is not aligned.
Yeah.
And lack of people and skills and knowledge, which there's also lack of talent, right? So if you actually have someone that is really skilled and really good, it's hard to keep them because everyone wants them. So it's like the fight of keeping the good ones is probably harder than just attracting new talent.
Yeah. And Karim, you can maybe go even more into like technical detail. What are the most common misconfigurations, vulnerabilities, issues you see? Because you do quite a lot of like cloud security assessments where you go into an environment, you use some tools that you've written, get a lot of output and process that to find their issues.
Right. So I think first thing that comes to mind would be legacy cloud. Like people that went to the cloud early, or not even early, they went to the cloud with like one platform and then they forgot to modernize the platform. So it's kind of stuck in this like old way of doing cloud. And why is there an old way of doing cloud already? Because cloud is new, you could argue, but there is an old way, a new way of doing cloud. So with the years, the cloud providers have given us more tools and other ways of solving the issues. And I think some of the architectures I'm seeing are like lack of segmentation, for instance. Just the level where you're placing segmentation in the cloud has changed. Like there's a really good talk from reInvent on YouTube from Netflix explaining how they've moved to a multi-cloud setup. And like, given like everyone thinks of Netflix as like the cloud security leader, you'd imagine they've been in multi-cloud since the concept came out like 5 years ago, but they're actually moving there now. And that also means a lot of other organizations as well is now moving into multi-account for AWS, or if they're using Azure, maybe they're still segmenting their resources on resource groups rather than subscriptions because they haven't gotten the vending in place. So those are like some of what I would argue.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of just who is responsible for what. People just don't know. Things are in the cloud, and who pushed the code there, who provisioned the machine, who's going to patch it, who's responsible for it, is tagged. Yeah, so it's probably like the brown field, right? Or the brown versus green field in cloud.
Lacking basic hygiene.
Yeah, because when I see a lack of complete governance, I immediately like, okay, this is brownfield. Let's see how we're going to do greenfield in this cloud environment. You could kind of work your way backwards to establishing governance, but that's most likely not going to sustain. So you have to redefine how you do cloud and just, brand that as brownfield or label it as brownfield and then go greenfield for the new stuff where you
and I guess in the greenfield you can even technically enforce, this needs to be tagged with a team name, which I then can use later to operationalize and democratize cloud security for that team, right?
Yeah.
So it's impossible to not follow the golden path, or what you want to call it.
Exactly, and now we're kind of going back to the same concepts like visibility, platform engineering, paved path.
Yeah, I agree, and I have like experiences from my own career where you go into a client and they're like, yeah, that's cloud number 1. And then we have cloud number 2, and we're building cloud number 3 now.
Because next year we're going to talk about cloud number 4.
Yeah, because cloud 1, well, that went bad. It costs more. We didn't even manage to get stuff on the internet, and nothing worked. Cloud 2, yeah, we're serving our customers from cloud 2, but we know we have some like basic primitives that are wrong. But cloud 3, it's going to be so good. We're doing Google Kubernetes engine. Everything is code. Everything is so cool.
Yeah, and then suddenly when you do it right, it's actually you actually talk to clients which now are cheaper infra in the cloud compared to on-prem, right? Because they have containerized, they have modernized, use the right tooling instead of just doing the same as they did on-prem in cloud.
Yeah.
And I think cost also boils down to like the total cost of ownership. Like if they have more abstraction and less manual processes, well, that's a cost saving as well. But I think what you're touching upon there with like the third cloud, and like why is the third cloud the one that's always going to be right? I think it's because people have adopted the mindset that you don't build a cloud platform and then set and forget it. Cloud platform is a product in itself, so you need to have continuous product development of your cloud platform if you're serving a large organization. So I think that's like the third time is probably the charm now that we're seeing the rise of platform engineering.
I want to ask you a question, Håkon. I'm throwing a question to you now.
Don't forget that you're not the host anymore,
Sorry.
but I'll allow this one.
One question. So we also see a lot of the usual security teams working on-prem having challenges modernizing to work in a cloud security way. I know you have some quite interesting or a lot of knowledge there. What do you see about us as a security people also being part of that transformation?
Yeah, it's of course very hard to get people to change how they do stuff, what they know, what they want to do. So that's a huge journey. But if I would say if you're able to make them understand that this cloud thing can be to your advantage. You can set it up so everything follows policy, and then you can also start using the cloud services to automate and to scale your security operations. If you make them understand that, and you say, okay, all the boring stuff you do with handling these incidents that happen 10 times every day, we can automate that. You don't have to deal with resetting user passwords because they clicked a malicious link. This Power App does it for you, or this Lambda function does it for you. Then they're like, oh, so I can start doing what I think is fun, which is looking into this and this. Yeah, if we just go on this journey together, then you can in the future do that. And they're like, okay, how do I learn Terraform?
So there is a lot of people upskilling here from all of us.
Yeah.
It's not that much about technology, actually.
Definitely. I think you have to, and it depends on the organization, context, situation, etc. But in many cases, you need to earn the privilege of investing in tools. But depending on your maturity and where you want to go, maybe you're going from Cloud 2 to Cloud 3, then you invest in a tool so you do Cloud 3 correctly. And tooling depends on if you're heavily into AppSec or CloudSec or need a platform you can do your whole cloud security operations from. And on that Cloud 3, there's this next question coming up. Do you guys feel cloud security as a whole has matured a lot in the last couple of years? What do you see in the industry as a general and then the clients we interface with?
I think the CSPs, the cloud service providers, or the hyperscalers, as some call them, have made it a lot easier for us to get the basics right. Like there's service control policies has been around for a while. Google keeps adding to their organization policy constraints. Azure policy is a fairly rich language. Now there's resource policy constraints as well. Resource control policies for AWS. There's disabling default public access for S3. Like those things weren't there 8 years ago when we started doing cloud. So it's become a lot easier now than it used to be, I'd argue.
Yeah, and for the, let's call it the cloud clients, I would say those who are at the end of the journey or maturity, then yes. So in average all over Norway at least, which I know the best, then yes. But those who are early in journey is like still a lot of the same stuff we saw 5 years ago.
It's very interesting that we see in clients and organizations today the same mistakes and issues others did 8 years ago. How can one address it, and how do you on a personal level feel about that, Karim?
But just a quick comment, we actually just today read about a big something was publicly exposed from a big new AI provider, and it was a SQL injection. So yeah. I guess even though it's cloud or if it's on-prem, it seems like you still get those things you knew about 20 years ago. You still see them today, right?
Yeah, and let's segue on that. Sorry, Karim, you never got to answer the question, but let's segue. Because the next question is there any real difference between cybersecurity, cloud security, private cloud security, on-prem security, multi-cloud security, etc., etc.? Like, is there a real difference, or are we just doing exactly the same thing, thinking about confidentiality, integrity, and availability, just with other underlying technologies and primitives?
You answered the question for me, at least.
I think you're right. It's the same thing, but it's just different domains. And I think being able to secure a specific domain requires domain level knowledge, and I think that's kind of where the challenge lies.
Yeah.
Yes, different ways of working, I would say, on transformation part, but the basics still a lot of the same, I would say.
Yeah. I agree. And on that very revolutionizing question and answer, let's start wrapping up here. So, do you guys have any closing thoughts on the season ahead and the cloud security challenges in general?
No, but I feel inside of me now that I'm super excited for this season. I think it'll be a really good season. I know we have some really good guests coming up. Sorry, you have some really good guests coming up.
No, it's our podcast. It's still going to be our podcast. You guys are going to be...
But I think people following this podcast will recognize a lot of stuff, learn a lot of stuff, and be also motivated to go back to their computer and do stuff better.
Yeah. And then on that note, this is for all the listeners and all the upcoming guests. This is going to be where you are able to plug your open source projects, what you're working on, upcoming talks. So Karim, do you have anything exciting coming up in the future?
Yes, I do. I have some really cool research going on AWS. So my first kind of like cloud vulnerability was a AWS solutions project. This is probably 4 years ago or something, and I haven't had anything since then. But now I'm working with the AWS vulnerability disclosure program on a new vulnerability in an AWS solution. So I'm really excited to share that one. And then I also have something else cool going on together with you, Håkon. We'll be presenting some research on OIDC and cloud environments on Hackon in February, and also releasing an open source project related to that.
That's, first of all, the cloud vulnerability. That's very cool stuff. I remember we first met when I was a consultant at your previous employer, and I was told the story about how you did a security assessment on an AWS tool that ended up having AWS end of life the tool. So interesting seeing another AWS vulnerability coming up. And of course, I also want to plug the talk at Hackon. I think that's going to be very cool. Olav, what about you?
Well, besides being an old YouTube blogger now trying to stay young, we're going to Stockholm together in March. Is it, Håkon?
It's May.
It's May. Yeah. Same. And have talked for several companies, which is part of our private equity umbrella.
Yeah.
I think is the easiest way to say. Talking about exactly what we're discussing here in the podcast, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to that.
I think that's going to be an interesting talk, doing like cloud security transformation with a concrete technical example so you can reach the whole audience, and then being able to expand upon that in the breakout sessions afterwards. It's I don't know the concrete numbers, but it's like 200 portfolio companies that are sending their security personnel, and all of them are like SaaS born in the cloud stuff. So
we need to prepare.
We need to prepare. So on that note, I just want to thank you guys for being here for the first episode. I also want to thank you for the opportunity of taking this podcast even further. It's been, when I started in O3C, all the people I met were like, oh yeah, the podcast is so cool. I've even met people at conferences who see you, Olav, and they're like, oh, it's Olav from the podcast. So I'm very grateful for that opportunity. Thank you, guys.
And we're bringing it back alive. So thank you, Håkon.
Thanks, Håkon.
Thank you.
See you.